Today at the National Press Club, Minister for Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel, Matt Keogh. 1 year on from the federal government's response to the harrowing Royal Commission into Defence and Veterans suicide, what's changed? Matt Keogh with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to today's Westpac National Press Club address here in Canberra. I'm Greg Jennett, Director of the club and, when I'm not doing that, an ABC journalist. Today our guest is Matt Keogh, Veterans Affairs and Defence Personnel Minister. Welcome, Matt. We'll do that formally again in just a moment. But it was in September last year that the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide completed and presented to the government its final report, representing just over 3 years of work. It produced some weighty documents and 122 recommendations. So, winding on from that, today does mark the 1 year anniversary of the government's response to that report, and Minister Keogh will update us on progress there today. For perspective on the problem being confronted, though, by the Royal Commission's own estimates over a 24-year period, the deaths of more than 3,000 serving or former ADF members could have been prevented, it found. In other words, were preventable. Not only that, the Royal Commission also looked at trying to make defence life just a better experience, a better one, more rewarding for those who undertake dangerous work on behalf of our nation, in the hope that they may stay longer and their families may enjoy military life too. So that's the context for what the Minister will be addressing today. Matt Keogh, he's been Minister in this portfolio for about 3.5 years now. He's a lawyer from Perth, based in the seat of Burt. So let's now welcome Matt Keogh with today's Westpac National Press Club address.
Well, thank you very much, Greg, and I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we are all gathering here today and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And thank you, of course, to the National Press Club for hosting me here today. I want to acknowledge all of those who serve and have served our nation in uniform in this room, their families, and all of those who are deployed on operations at this moment. Thank you also to the leaders of the organisations that I have the great privilege of working with who are here today, both from Defence and the Department of Veterans Affairs. But they are just a few of the faces, alongside the thousands of staff across both departments who are working every day to defend Australia and its national interests and support those who have and continue to serve our nation. The well-being of our serving defence personnel, veterans and the families of veterans is my key priority. It is the honour of my life to be a minister in the Albanese government, and the task of creating systemic change to improve the lives of defence personnel, veterans and veteran families is not one that I take lightly. However, when I was given the portfolios of Minister for Veterans Affairs and Minister for Defence Personnel, so many veterans told me they thought the approach of DVA was delay, deny, die. It is my role to consign that phrase to the dustbin of history. According to the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare, between 1997 and 2023, 1,840 serving and ex-serving ADF members have died by suicide. That's 1,840 too many. From opposition, Labor heard the calls of families, of mothers like Julianne Finney, who's here with us today, that something needed to be done about veteran suicide, that it is a national tragedy, that we needed a royal commission into defence and veteran suicide. Whilst the Morrison government bowed to political pressure to establish a royal commission in 2021, Labor didn't just sit around and wait. While the then Veterans Minister was threatening to resign due to the Morrison government's underfunding of the Department of Veterans Affairs, we were listening to veterans and families and committed from opposition to fixing the system. At the 2022 election, we promised a package of more than $500 million for the veteran community. When the Albanese government came to office, the Department of Veterans Affairs was not fit for purpose. Some may even say that it was in crisis. After almost a decade of underfunding and under-resourcing, the department was unable to keep up with demand. Veterans weren't getting access to the services and supports that they were entitled to. At the same time, recruitment and retention in defence was in freefall. Not only were people not signing up for the ADF, they were also leaving at record levels, putting more pressure on defence and DVA. So it was in that context that the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide was making it abundantly clear we needed to make significant cultural and systemic change in both defence and DVA to reduce the rates of suicide in our veteran community. Now, it's important that I take this opportunity, though, to be clear. Not all veterans are broken, and we all need to work together to dispel this myth. We heard from the chair of the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide, Nick Keogh, in this very room, that the vast majority of those who serve in the ADF have rewarding careers and go on to successfully transition to civilian life. Whilst not in any way shying away from the very important issues requiring attention, this positive experience and ongoing contribution to our defence personnel and veterans is fundamental. Veterans are one of the most sought-after group of individuals in the civilian workforce, with our veteran employment program highlighting the skills and the successes of those who continue to contribute after military service, as well as supporting civilian recognition of their military training, skills and experience. Now, I'm sure that we all agree that the experiences shared with the Royal Commission were deeply distressing. It was only a matter of months after coming to government that we were handed the first report, the Royal Commission's interim report, and we delivered our response only a month later. We had heard their urgent call for action. One of the most heartbreaking statistics to come out of the Royal Commission was that there was a backlog of some 42,000 veteran claims that hadn't even been looked at by staff at the Department of Veterans Affairs. 42,000 claims not even looked at. This staggering statistic meant that thousands of veterans and families of veterans were prevented from getting the help that they desperately needed. The interim report also revealed that the veteran compensation and rehabilitation legislative system was so complex that, quote, it adversely affects the mental health of some veterans and can be a contributing factor to suicidality. That has seen us now fundamentally reform the veteran support system, the most significant reforms to the system in a century. With the passage of the Veterans Entitlement, Treatment and Support, Simplification and Harmonisation Act, the VETS Act, earlier this year, that complex tri-act veteran entitlement system has been simplified and harmonised into a single act system to commence from the 1st of July next year. This will see veterans and veteran families able to receive the supports they need and deserve faster. As recommended in the interim report and promised at the 2022 election, we delivered 500 additional staff to process claims in the Department of Veterans Affairs, and that's meant support is reaching the veterans who need it faster. We've cleared the claim backlog in February of last year. So now, when someone submits an initial liability claim to DVA, it is looked at within a fortnight, rather than gathering dust for months or years on end. In the 2025 calendar year, an initial liability claim under the Military Rehabilitation and Compensation Act, the most common type of claim lodged, is being processed in an average of 110 days. Under the Albanese government, DVA is better funded than it has been in 3 decades. These investments have resulted in an increase in support for veterans. This year's MyEFO will show an extra $1.3 billion is estimated to be spent on health and other care services for our veterans. But while there have been significant improvements, we're also not resting on our laurels. We want to make things even more efficient and a more positive experience for veterans and their families overall. That's why we've committed even more funding to DVA's ICT and AI capabilities to further improve the time it takes to process a veteran's claim. This is some $700 million invested since we came to government. Today is 12 months to the day from when I joined the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister to deliver the government's response to the final report of the Royal Commission. Over those 12 months, we have achieved much, and there is even more underway. We're focused on implementing the recommendations of the final report as swiftly as possible. In December last year, the government announced we had agreed in principle to 104 of the recommendations, and an enormous amount of progress has already been made to implement these. By the end of December this year, we will have implemented the government's response to 32 recommendations, with a further 89 recommendations in progress or under consideration now. For those who are able to do quick maths in the room, yes, we are working and progressing on recommendations that we initially noted for further work. By the end of next year, we are expecting some 2/3 of all of the recommendations to be implemented or to be progressing. Next week, I'll meet with state and territory veterans ministers to continue to progress those recommendations that we need to work on together. The Royal Commission itself said that its most important recommendation was the creation of a legislated, independent oversight body to oversee sustained reform to improve suicide prevention and wellbeing outcomes for serving and ex-serving ADF members. We saw the urgency and legislated the new Defence and Veterans Service Commission in February of this year. It commenced operations in September. It will provide its first report on the implementation of the government's response to the Royal Commission by 2 December 2027. Another key area of focus, though, of the Royal Commission was sexual misconduct in the ADF. The Royal Commission dedicated a whole volume to sexual violence, unacceptable behaviour and military justice. Its findings are chilling. A core part of the Anzac spirit is knowing your mate, your team, has your back when the chips are down. The scourge of sexual violence within our Defence Force is completely inconsistent with this, and we must do better at tackling this challenge. Ensuring the well-being of our people isn't soft. It's about making sure we have the best warfighters ready when we need them. There is no shying away from Defence still not getting this right. Lots has been done, but people, especially women, are still experiencing this behaviour. This is not acceptable. A key step to solving this is to first acknowledge this, and we do. That is why there's a huge amount of work that's happening to continue to improve the wellbeing and safety of personnel, and it starts from the top, with better leadership accountability and greater transparency of progress against cultural targets. I think we can all agree that when it comes to this issue, our language can matter just as much as our actions. And that is why Defence is now referring to all sexual and related offences, sexual harassment and sexual discrimination, as sexual violence, rather than just sexual misconduct. Defence is also working with the Australian Human Rights Commission on the implementation of the Defence Respect at Work framework, a specialist defence system recognising the unique interface of military personnel, public servants and contractors at home and on deployment. By the end of 2025, the Human Rights Commission will have delivered an initial assessment to inform Respect at Work action plans for each service. While the military justice system has a different function from the Australian criminal justice system, Australian civilian law also applies to our ADF personnel. Defence policies have been updated to not only more clearly define sexual offences and reporting requirements, but also to make training to manage sexual misconduct mandatory. Not only does sexual violence cause serious harm to individuals, it undermines defence and impacts our operational effectiveness. Inconsistent handling of cases and the continued presence of offenders within the ADF have eroded confidence in Defence's ability to keep its people safe. If there's one message that I want perpetrators to take from my address today, it is this. If you engage in sexual violence, you can presume that you no longer have a job in our Defence Force. In October, the Chief of the Defence Force released an order of the day reinforcing Defence's position that sexual violence has no place in the organisation. The government will be backing that up with legislative force next year. Now, the Australian community expects that when ADF personnel are convicted of serious offences by a court-martial or Defence Force magistrate, those offences should be included in a criminal record check. From next week, Defence will be reporting service convictions of sexual and related offences to the National Police Reference System. This means that personnel who commit civilian equivalent offences can no longer hide their conduct within the military justice system. The Royal Commission also recommended that the government commission an independent expert inquiry into military sexual violence in the ADF. Today, the Human Rights Commission has opened consultation on the terms of reference for this inquiry, and we expect that the inquiry will commence mid-next year. The Australian Human Rights Commission will also lead research into the prevalence and effects of military sexual trauma that will be completed in 2026 and feed into the sexual misconduct inquiry. In parallel, a great deal of work has been underway to improve the supports available for Defence families throughout our term. We've delivered better options, supports and flexibility for housing, as well as an expansion of the ADF Family Health Program, to name a few. We've also been getting about making sure we're minimising the negative impacts of the posting cycle on Defence members and families by providing better visibility and flexibility of where a member might be posted across their careers. The changes reflect our Defence and Veteran family wellbeing strategy. We've also delivered the Defence Workforce Plan and introduced 2 milestones in a Defence member's career where they can now become eligible for a continuation bonus. These initiatives have been working. In the last financial year, separation rates for the ADF fell to just 7.9%, the lowest in over a decade and a massive drop from the 11.2% separation rate that we inherited coming into government, when the size of the ADF was going backwards. So what does this mean? It means the measures we're talking about to support people in service and their families are working because they're choosing to stick around. We've turned around what was a Defence recruitment crisis. In the 2024-25 financial year, more than 7,050 people joined the ADF and Gap Year program, the highest intake in 15 years. We're also making sure employment opportunities within Defence are enhanced for people who can't be deployed. Historically, ADF members who could not be deployed due to medical or other reasons often faced career limitations or medical separation, resulting in the loss of valuable skills and experience in our Defence workforce. as well as great anxiety for those who are affected. Creating meaningful roles for non-deployable members not only helps address workforce pressures, it supports their mental health and well-being, and that's why we've now developed career management guidance for non-deployable members to keep them in our ADF longer. The Royal Commission had a particular focus on the broader well-being of defence personnel, veterans and families, aimed at preventing harm and supporting early intervention. This means improving continuity of care in the system across the veteran community, whether it's a digger's first day on the job or decades later. People's service life impacts their life as a veteran. It's a continuum, and making sure we approach it holistically is vitally important, and that is why we produced the first ever Defence and Veteran mental health and wellbeing strategy. We're also working to better understand how we can better support the health and wellbeing of defence personnel, veterans and veteran families, with wide-ranging research underway, taking action on a number of Royal Commission recommendations, coordinating research between Defence and DVA together with external experts. There has now been a significant shift within the Department of Veterans Affairs, indeed across the whole veteran ecosystem, to have a deeper focus on veterans' wellbeing. The Albanese government is providing $78 million over 4 years to establish a new veteran and family wellbeing agency, and it will be up and running in July 2026. Through our new agency for veteran and family wellbeing, there will be a renewed focus on successful transition from military to civilian life, community connection and improving wellbeing outcomes for veterans and families of veterans, delivering on Recommendation 87 and providing for the coordinated delivery of related recommendations 80, 81 and 86. The agency will focus on the overall wellbeing of veterans and families while providing wraparound support for at-risk veterans as they transition out of the Australian Defence Force. Sadly, in the latest Australian Institute of Health and Welfare statistics, the cohort most vulnerable to suicide remains those who transition out of the ADF involuntarily, including through medical or disciplinary grounds. This makes it all the more important that the agency takes on transition support responsibilities that are currently shared between Defence and Veterans Affairs to make sure no one falls through the gaps. This will deliver on Recommendation 80 of the Royal Commission. The agency will also strengthen access to supports across the nation, working with the DVA Veteran Access Network, Open Arms and our Veterans and Families Hub network to make sure that there is sufficient, sustainably funded, reliable, coordinated and accessible support across the country. Importantly, this new agency will have a remit for complex case management, wellbeing service coordination, a referral concierge and a hotline. The Royal Commission said that access to enhanced care for service-related conditions is essential for improving wellbeing outcomes. Veterans often find they're better able to express and process emotions and experience that may be difficult to put into words, to manage stress and connect with others when they're undertaking what can be regarded as somewhat unconventional rehabilitation activities, things like creative or sporting activities with other veterans. This is something veterans can now formally access through DVA. We are also continuing to roll out our Veterans and Families Hubs and new veteran housing and homelessness support across the country. Veterans can now get access to the most up-to-date treatment and rehabilitation options, whether that is through world-leading PTSD treatments using MDMA or psilocybin for treatment of resistant depression, targeted pain relief using medicinal cannabis, rehabilitation for joint pain, specific tinnitus treatments, or the psychiatric assistance dogs. We're working to make sure veterans have access to high quality, comprehensive and coordinated care from their clinical teams. From the 1st of July 2026, we'll be rolling out veteran-specific mental health care plan funding to support GPs and psychiatrists, providing proactive, continuous and connected care for veterans experiencing mental health conditions. We are also undertaking a refresh of the eligibility and program requirements for the Coordinated Veteran Care Program to broaden eligibility. An advisory panel will be set up to make sure that we get this right. We're also thinking outside the box with initiatives like the groundbreaking group-based PTSD trauma recovery program that is run by Open Arms in Hobart, so that Tasmanian veterans can better access support without unnecessarily needing to travel to the mainland. We're expanding that program across the nation. We're working to address the critical knowledge and evidence gaps in the treatment of PTSD and other mental health conditions as identified by the Royal Commission. Despite the condition's treatability, we're seeing a growth in PTSD-focused claims, making it clear that current evidence, treatment options and the workforce are not fully meeting veterans' needs. We're working to improve the quality and translation of this research. We will partner with organisations delivering and trialling innovative mental health treatments and expand the availability of military-aware mental health professionals. DVA is also working more closely with Defence on preventative actions to avoid or mitigate injuries in service. By making sure that veterans access better, modern prevention, treatment and rehabilitation, we're getting in early, before conditions deteriorate or become chronic, with all the negative ongoing lifestyle impacts that entails. Overall, though, it is not enough to simply increase the Department of Veterans Affairs capability. We must also secure the integrity of the veteran system to ensure that veterans and families receive the best possible care from those that have their well-being at heart. An unintended consequence of speeding up claims processing is a rise in concerning behaviour from paid and commission-based advocates, as well as a concerning rise in inappropriate and sometimes illegal profiteering by providers to the detriment of veterans. Instances of fraud and inappropriate advocate-practitioner relationships means we are tightening compliance measures to ensure the system, and indeed veterans themselves, are not exploited. We're updating our fee schedule for report writing, ensuring that payments for reports are more consistent with other equivalent jurisdictions and better reflect actual costs for practitioners. These compliance measures are to ensure taxpayer dollars are going where they should, to veteran support. These updates to DVA's compliance rules will not be noticed by the vast majority of practitioners who act with integrity. DVA will also ensure it supports veterans who have found themselves impacted by such practices. I also want to really encourage veterans to work with their usual treating GPs on medical reports for DVA, rather than going to a new provider who might not know them very well. Now, volunteer veteran advocates have been a core part, indeed, of Australia's veteran support system for over a century, with mates supporting mates being a founding principle. But as we've heard in the recent Senate inquiry, some very concerning behaviours have emerged. I was enraged to hear evidence that veterans are being charged a staggering amount in fees, things like $20,000 for a single day's work by an advocate, and charging commissions as high as 29% of a veteran's DVA compensation payment. We've even heard of $20,000 contract break fees and a charge of more than $30,000 for a single report. The commercialisation of this system began when the backlog of claims blew out under the former government, with commercial advocates making false promises that they can get a veteran's claim processed faster. I'm grateful for the Senate Committee's work in looking into this behaviour, and to Senator Lambie for her partnership in bringing forward the inquiry. As a government, we agree to the committee recommendations relating to better regulation of the advocacy system, and we will consult with the sector on constraints to better protect our veterans from unscrupulous advocates, all while not over-regulating a largely volunteer service. We will be providing funding to the new Institute of Veterans Advocacy to act as a professional association for veteran advocates that will ensure more advocates are appropriately trained, qualified and required to comply with ethics and conduct rules. Entities applying for the government's Building Excellence in Support and Training, BEST, grants program funding will be required to utilise advocates registered with the Institute. Advocates that charge fees will also be required to be members of the Institute and comply with its rules regarding fee structures in order to eradicate egregious charging behaviours. We will work closely with the sector in developing a fit-for-purpose model to ensure good access to advocates whilst protecting veterans. In order to better support the advocacy system and noting the strain on ex-service organisations in funding free-to-use advocates, we are more than doubling funding to the BEST program to enable more advocates to deliver services that will be free for veterans and give organisations greater future funding certainty, implementing Recommendation 99 of the Royal Commission's final report. I want to be really clear with veterans and veteran families. When choosing to use or to recommend an advocate, you do not need to pay for something that you can and will get for free. I encourage all veterans and veteran families to find qualified, free-to-use advocates to support you on the DVA Advocate Registry. Anzac Day and Remembrance Day are powerful reminders of the enduring cost of war and the immense sacrifice made by those who have given their lives in the service of our nation. As we remember the fallen, we must also remain steadfastly focused on the well-being of the living every day. We now face the most complex set of strategic circumstances since the Second World War. It is in our national interest to protect the well-being of those who protect us. After all, for what they have done, this we will do. The Royal Commission's task for us as a government is no small feat. This is the most comprehensive reform to the systems, processes and culture to support defence personnel, veterans and families ever undertaken in Australia. This will ensure that defence personnel, veterans and families receive the care and services and supports that they not only need, but they deserve. I want to see all Australians attracted to serving in our Australian Defence Force, confident that they and their families will be well supported by their leaders, their mates and the broader defence organisation, both during and following their time in service. We want our personnel to be safe in the knowledge that whatever may happen to them in service, they and their families will be looked after and acknowledged by a grateful nation. Thank you.
Minister, thank you very much for your presentation. I know it'll give rise to plenty of questions. I have more than a few myself, so I might lead off before throwing over to the colleagues. You did spend a bit of time referencing veteran and family well-being, which takes us to, in fact, one of the recommendations agreed to, but I think not yet implemented by the Royal Commission, Recommendation 86, concerned funding security, funding guarantees for veterans and families hubs. Now, we've heard the news nationally today from Townsville that the Oasis Townsville, which as I understand it was a founding veterans and families hub in this country, will close its doors in 10 days because it lacks that funding certainty and is actually been on a decline path for some time already. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but were a funding guarantee to be provided by DVA, that would give it the certainty to continue. Alas, it hasn't come to pass. Will you commit today to intervening as Minister to direct a more permanent or at least a guaranteed source of funding for that particular facility?
Thanks, Greg. So the first thing I really want to say about that is for any veterans that are in or around Townsville that access services and supports there, that there's also the Mates for Mates in Townsville and some other services. So it's important to recognise the breadth of services to make sure that our veterans are well supported in what is one of our primary garrison cities in Australia. In respect to Oasis itself, they were one of the original hubs that was funded by the previous government on the basis that they would then work towards a sustainable funding model for themselves. Subsequent to that, they've really been operating off funding that they've received from the Queensland State Government to provide some specific services. A few weeks ago, they got in touch with us around requiring some additional funding. They provided us with some information, and DVA has been engaging with Oasis around what a pathway forward may look like. So I was disappointed to see that email given that engagement, but we'll continue to engage with Oasis about what that may involve.
Okay, so is there a disconnect in timing here? Are you suggesting that there may be a funding solution that could head off this imminent closure?
Well, we need to work with Oasis to see what the root of their financial position and their service delivery model is going to be going forward, so that we can work through them with that. More broadly,
over what time frame?
Well, we need to continue to engage. As I say, that they'd only contacted us a few weeks ago to say that with the call for funding from the Commonwealth Government right now, and we'll work through that with them.
Okay. Would it be regretful if it were to close as intended?
Well, certainly I think the promise of the Oasis Centre was a very good one. And I visited the Oasis Centre shortly after I became the Minister to see the sorts of service offering they have, as well as I've visited many of the other services that are available to support our veteran community through Townsville, as I have around Australia. We'll make sure that we engage with them if there's a sustainable option going forward.
Okay, enough from me. Let's go to AAP. Tess Economy is with us today.
Thank you very much for your time, Minister. You've just touched on the importance of accountability and how sexual violence in the military is unacceptable. Why then is the government trying to exclude incidents that occurred on international deployments from the class action currently in court?
So the first thing I need to say about the class action that's in court is it's in court, and it's in court today. So I can't really comment on the specifics of what's come up today or how those arguments are being presented.
But you're the Commonwealth, you're the government trying to make sure that this cannot be included within the scope.
I'm not aware of that, and also it's not a matter that's being run by Defence. It's being run by ComCover, but that's the first I've heard of that, and I'm happy to look into it.
Does the government consider sexual misconduct only unacceptable when it occurs within Australia?
Sexual misconduct in our Defence Force is unacceptable wherever it occurs. I'm very clear on that.
Just before we get to the next question, since there's a logical sequence here, you did have a very pointed message to perpetrators in your presentation. If you engage in sexual violence, presume you no longer have a job. You've indicated you'll give legislative backing to an order of the day from the CDF. Why is that legislation necessary? What deficiency or ambiguity will it address?
It will address an issue around how the current process is set out under Defence regulations for the termination of a member of the Defence Force. In order to deal with those processes, there's currently a legislative provisions for a presumption of termination in relation to the taking of illegal drugs. This would be able to give the similar force to a presumption in these cases as well, which requires legislation to make sure that it works through all the necessary procedural steps.
So have there been cases where termination has not been possible because it lacked this legislative?
Usually it's not necessarily that it's not possible, but we want to make sure that we are being very clear about meeting all the procedural requirements and that that's got legislative force. It also sends a very clear message, as the provisions that are currently in the legislation do in respect of using illegal drugs, that will not be tolerated, and the presumption is you are leaving.
Right. Andrew Green from The Nightly.
Minister, earlier this year at the Remembrance Day ceremony, the former RSL President, Greg Mellick, bemoaned the enthusiasm of modern generations to join the ADF and possibly have to fight for their country. I was hoping for a response to those comments, and if Greg will indulge a second question related to Papua New Guinea and recruitment efforts there. What are you going to be doing? Are you going to be using the providers that we use in Australia, or will you be relying on the PNG government itself to be doing that recruiting?
So to your first question, what I'm really pleased to see that is not only that we've been able to recruit more people than we have in the last 15 years in the last year, we've seen the number of applications increasing. And in some cases steadily increasing in the case of Navy, which is wonderful, which says to me that the criticism or the concern that the former president of the RSL raised is not borne out in the numbers. We're seeing more and more people applying to join our Defence Force, and I'm really pleased to see that. In terms of recruitment from PNG, we'll be adopting a similar approach that we're taking for permanent residents from other Five Eyes countries. Initially, so that will involve for people who are already permanent residents here in Australia, have been here for a year, they will be able to apply to join the Defence Force, and that will be a pathway to citizenship for them, because we do require people who join our Defence Force to become an Australian citizen. They have to meet all the other ordinary usual tests and checks, as you would expect. We will then, in terms of what may happen beyond that, we're still working through how that would operate with PNG.
All right, I'll indicate to Andrew and others, if time permits, we'll loop around and you might come back for more later. But in the meantime, Noah Im is with us from The Australian.
Hello, Minister.
I know.
In the last financial year, there were 215 reported alleged sexual offences in the ADF. I recognise that you've laid out some action on this front today, but do you think the problem has been getting worse under your watch? And what's missing in the response here?
So I don't think the situation has been getting worse, but it's certainly not an acceptable situation that we're confronting now. Some of those reports that were made in that last financial year do relate to historical events, so they didn't all occur necessarily in that year. And that needs to be taken into account. But frankly, one is too many. We don't want to see this happening at all in our Defence Force. I don't think we want to see this happening at all in our society. And that's why it's clear on those statistics and many others that there's still work that we need to do, and we'll keep doing that.
From the ABC, Laura Lavelle.
Hello, Minister.
Hey, Laura.
Just a question about the sexual violence inquiry. We know this isn't the first time this issue has been under the microscope. There was the Broderick report more than a decade ago, the IG-ADF inquiry in 2021, and of course a major focus as well of the Royal Commission. And in fact, the Royal Commission also found that while Defence was moving to implement the recommendations of the previous report, it was failing to deliver deep systemic change. My question is, how is this inquiry going to be different, and can you promise that it will deliver deep, systemic, meaningful outcomes?
So I think what the opportunity that the Royal Commission was looking for is from its broad survey, and we saw this in the lead up to the Royal Commission, was that there had been many inquiries into many different aspects that were feeding into defence and veteran suicide and suicidality. And not all of those recommendations had been implemented, or if they'd been implemented not in full, or that weren't meeting the underlying need that needed to be addressed. And that was a key part of what the Royal Commission in whole was looking to address. What it is, and that is similar for this sexual violence inquiry that it called for, is recognising there has been those previous inquiries, that some of that work has happened, but it hasn't necessarily resulted in the cultural change that is required. One of the things I referred to early in my speech was about the need to make sure that there's a degree of accountability and transparency in what we're doing in Defence and addressing these issues. So a key part of that is with the cultural blueprint, which Defence has released, that there's accountabilities for Defence leadership on those things being implemented, us seeing that cultural change. The other thing is making reports like we did in the annual report that was just published, being very clear and transparent about what the reports are that we're seeing, what those statistics are. We're not hiding that. We know we need to get about dealing with it.
Laura, thank you. Melissa Keogh is with us from the Mandarin.
Hi, Minister. Thanks for your talk. You gave a really good example for department capability of claims processing backlog and how the government better resourced the department to meet that need. I wonder if you can speak to capability of another kind in the department. So last year, a capability review at DVA highlighted that delivery was being impacted by a shortage of enterprise-wide strategic policy capability, which really was impacted by the fact that DVA, and as I'm sure you'd appreciate your portfolio, it operates in this world of reaction. and the ever-changing cohort of veterans that you need to service, the needs they meet, they're complex, they're changing, they're evolving. Why is enterprise-wide strategic policy capability important for DVA, and how do we make sure that that's not a political football, if you will, that changes as the wind blows and different governments of the day come in and out?
Sure. I think it's important across government, full stop, not just DVA. But one of the issues that we see, as you mentioned, DVA can be somewhat reactive. And that's why drawing together a more closer working relationship between Defence and DVA is really important. Being able to work not just on treatment and rehabilitation, but also prevention. Being able to understand what's evolving in Defence so that we can understand how that may also impact on what we need to make available to best support our veterans and families going forward. That's a capability that we are certainly growing in DVA. You can't get about implementing a thing like the Royal Commission recommendations without doing that, and doing that in a way that's coordinated with Defence as well. I think one of the things that has happened over time, where previous governments have been so reliant on the use of external consultants to do work in the public service, is it's meant that some of our best and brightest graduates who want to do great public policy work have decided to go work for consultants instead of in the public service. The work that we've done to bring more of that work in-house, whether that's in the work we're doing in DVA and being able to strategically plan, whether it's the work we're doing in terms of procurement management and design in the restructuring work we're doing in the Department of Defence, making sure that's in-house capability, a sovereign capability, is incredibly important, and you'll see that we're doing that across so many different areas of government.
Nick Stewart from
Thanks.
Ability News.
The first question was about operational deployments, and the issue with these is that, of course, we've got Army, Navy and Air Force being deployed. We also have, particularly nowadays, where you've got fluid lines of operation, different organisations such as, for example, the AFP, such as the diplomats, aid workers, others operating very much at the forefront of the desire that Australia has to implement change to the operational environment overseas. But they're all under different conditions of you know, if they have an injury or some other accident. Do you see a means of bringing, particularly in operational areas, all those groups together so that it won't matter if you happen to be a diplomat and receive a wound of some sort or another, or if you happen to be a soldier and receive a wound of some sort or another, so that we'll get a general approach to providing genuine support to people who are deployed overseas working in Australia's interests?
So I think you're very right to recognise that we have not just our defence forces employed and deployed overseas, but we have DFAT officials around the world all the time. We have our AFP operating in difficult environments, supporting our neighbours and partners in many different ways. They are all done on a cooperative basis with those partners. And the key thing here, and why we have a military compensation and rehabilitation system, is because of the very unique nature of military service. At one level, and doing some tasks, it may look very similar. And you may have all of those different organisations you described working shoulder to shoulder on some tasks. There are other tasks where it is the people in uniform that are doing something very unique on behalf of our nation in the most risky environments. And that's why we have a specialised system to support our Defence Force, but also ensuring that it covers the full gamut of operation of work that is done by our Defence Force.
But if a diplomat, for example, is severely injured in Uruzgan province, and they have been operating in effectively living in the forward operating base, and then they lose their mobility because of a bomb, and they've been working alongside, deployed with Australian forces, shouldn't at that point it be exactly the same situation, that they are receiving not merely support from an organisation like Foreign Affairs, which isn't designed to provide extra support when they return to Australia, but so that they can get the benefits of other ancillary services, rehabilitation services that are being provided for a bigger organisation like the military.
And they have access to rehabilitation and compensation through the existing public service system, and I'm not diminishing the point that you're making about their service, and we really need our people to sign up and join DFAT and do that work, and the AFP, who work not just here but around the globe as well on different things. But there is a unique nature to military service that is materially different. That is why it has a separate scheme.
Let's bring in Nazir Alvi from Epoch Times.
Hi, Matt. You did mention that you will be expanding health services for the veterans in rural area, but I would like to understand how exactly will that be done. Also, is the government considering broadening access to gold card services?
So in terms of the footprint around Australia, at the moment DVA has veteran access networks, we have open arm offices in certain places, and we've also got the build out and expansion of our veterans and families hubs in different places around Australia. And there's an opportunity with the new Veteran and Family Wellbeing Agency that we will be establishing to better coordinate all three of those different types of service delivery to make sure that we can best utilise the footprint that gives us, makes available to us. And when you look at DVA as an organisation, whether it's across the Veteran Access Network or across Open Arms or the Veterans and Families hubs, they're not just in capital cities. They're in our garrison cities, they're in our garrison towns, they're in other parts of Australia where we have significant Defence Force presences, and that's how we will be making that available through that footprint. You asked about expansion to the gold card.
Gold card services.
Yeah. So one of the things about the changes that we've made through the Vets Act is that it does open up accessibility to the gold card to a range of veterans who were previously covered under what's called the DIRCA, who never had access to the gold card. They were excluded from access to the gold card. It will mean that veterans that have been covered by that piece of legislation, if they have new claims or exacerbation of claims under from the 1st of July next year onwards, they will have the ability to make a claim under the new enhanced MERCA, which may, depending on their level of impairment, mean that they're able to access gold cards as well.
Thank you.
Right, we are tracking pretty well for time, so our news hounds will
Don't tell me that.
get another crack at you, Minister, in just a moment.
Greg said I should have longer answers. That's what I heard. Yep, okay.
I'll come back with one of my own, though. You have referenced record levels of retention, I suppose, at least a decline in separations. How much do you credit the $40,000 continuation bonus to that outcome?
Well, certainly we've had really significant uptake of the continuation bonuses, especially the first tranche of those bonuses, something like 79% take up. And we've also got people that have told us that they don't want to necessarily take that up, but they're staying in. And so that is making a big difference. But it's not just that. Certainly in the work that I've done as Minister, I've had the great opportunity of being able to visit serving personnel on bases all across Australia and indeed overseas. And one of the things I try to do when I talk to them is talk about what are the little friction points, what are the little things that are just niggling at you that aren't the thing that make you go, that's it, I'm out. But over time, they either cause frustration to them or their families. And result in them eventually leaving. Now, people will eventually leave Defence, we know that, but the way in which, the more that we can make those situations better, like improving the flexibility to Defence housing, for example, giving people more notice about where they're going to post to so they can make sure they can find a home and get access to enrol in a school. All of those things add up. And so that's what we've been doing through the implementation of our Defence and Veteran Family Support Strategy, which then means that we're able to better retain people in the ADF.
Yeah, I don't want to focus unduly on the continuation bonus, but I wonder if it's targeted to those it should be targeting. Junior officers, who I think typically are 5 to 10 years in. ASPE's analysis of the portfolio budget statements actually have defence going backwards against the targets there. 1,228 was the projected increase. They've gone backwards by 442. So the question is, could the bonus be better directed there?
So the bonus is targeted around when people finish their mandatory obligation of service period. So they stack on top of each other to meet those particular timings. And it means that they match up with the times that we see the most significant point of departure from the Defence Force. And so that's what we're targeting with the way in which those continuation bonuses are timed. With the second tranche of that, that'll start to have even more impact over the next few years as well. So we are seeing what the impact that we want. We always want to have a better impact, but when you see that separation rate is at an all-time low, basically, and certainly significantly lower than not just the long-term average, but what we saw when we came into government, the continuation bonuses, the other changes we've made, are clearly making a difference.
Okay, let's go back to Tess Economy.
Thank you again. Just on the proposed changes to the Defence Honours and Awards system, are you able to explain why the changes are needed when members of your own government couldn't back them after a parliamentary inquiry?
Well, I think what we saw with the consideration of that legislation was that whilst there was agreement that there was a number of changes that were accepted and seen as useful changes to make to modernise the operation of the tribunal, there were some areas that some in the veteran community thought needed to be worked through in more detail with them, with a greater degree of consultation. That's what the Senate inquiry found, and that's what we've committed to do.
But the inquiry didn't back in the 20-year limit in particular. It just said to go back, do further consultation, then make a decision at the end of that after it's all been made public.
And that's what we said we'd do.
Thank you.
Andrew Green will have another shot.
He's already had to.
Be a single question though. Minister, can you confirm that within Defence Force recruiting, Navy recruits who are transgender are being discouraged from applying for the nuclear stream because of possible conflict with the Pentagon's so-called war on woke and anti-DEI policies?
Certainly, we're aware that there's particular policy approaches that have been taken in the United States, and we need to have an awareness of that in terms of how we engage. But we're also really committed to our approach to supporting our defence people in every way, and that's what we're absolutely committed to doing, and working with them to best support their welfare in whatever decisions of postings or training or roles, whichever they choose to make.
So what would your message be to a transgender recruit who is looking to join the AUKUS, the US nuclear-powered submarine program?
I would give them the same message that I give to everyone who's even has the vaguest of interest in joining the Defence Force, which is please come and join our nuclear submarine program or any other program of the over 300 different roles that we have in the Defence Force.
And there is no formal guidance in the department?
Well, I'm not aware of the specific issue that you're speaking to, Andrew, but we are always seeking to encourage people of all backgrounds to join our Defence Force, because we want to see a Defence Force that reflects Australia. That's how we have a Defence Force that's in the best position to protect our national interest.
Now, Noah Yim from The Australian might get us close to time. We'll see how we go, Noah.
Thank you, Minister. On mild traumatic brain injuries, in September, you said that you were working on a comprehensive brain injury program. Earlier, you said you were undertaking work on this. Do you now accept that MTBI is a workplace health and safety issue in the ADF?
Well, no one's ever denied that there's a concern around the impact of continual repetitive blast exposure or brain trauma, and the work that's being led by Chief of Army around that work is incredibly important. It involves not just people in defence, it involves DVA, it involves external experts as well. What we need to work through, there's a whole range of different areas of work that's happening there, and we're working with our partner militaries that have done research and work on this, as well as being able to benefit from our own research that we're conducting. There are difficulties in being able to assess necessarily levels of impact, and that's where we need to continue to do more research so that we can best calibrate our safety requirements, so that we can best set our usage requirements, so that we can make sure that we are best protecting our people, not just in this area, but in every area of defence work.
But when might we hear about when might veterans and serving soldiers be able to hear about the outcome of that research?
Well, they're seeing that there are already limits that are in place now in terms of the use of particular weapons and certain training regimes that occur, and that will be continually refined and improved as we benefit from the research and work that we are doing, as well as being able to learn from the work that are being done by other defence forces in this area as well.
Thank you, Minister.
Right, cheeky final one from me as we wrap up. It's very much on the periphery of your prepared remarks today, but it does relate to something the Acting Prime Minister made us aware of yesterday. This is the PLA Navy Task Group that's in the Philippine Sea. You are privy to briefings from what is a very large defence organisation, I acknowledge. But what assets are being prepared, or are defence assets being prepared to shadow that flotilla if it became clear that it was heading south through the seas of Indonesia, PNG or Solomon Islands?
I think the Deputy Prime Minister was pretty clear on that yesterday, that that's not a level of detail to which we disclose.
I sort of thought you might...
But good try, Greg, good try.
Say that. A cheeky final one from me, that's for sure. Look, it's a big body of work, as you acknowledged at the outset, in your own portfolio. Matt Keogh, will you please thank the Minister for updating us today?